All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 11th, 2024 meeting of the Planning Commission. If you could please join me in the flag salute. If we could get the roll call, please.
Chair Weiler.
Here.
Vice Chair Barber.
Barely.
Commissioner Mercaro.
Here.
Commissioner Spear.
Here.
Commissioner Jester.
Here.
Commissioner Stevie. Here. And Commissioner Carell.
Here.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the minutes. Any questions, comments, or changes? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
Move approval of the minutes.
We have a first and a second. If we could get the roll call, please.
And voting has been opened. Be able to vote on the squares with the refresh button right there.
This voting is not open on my screen.
Mine either.
There it is. If you could try right now, please. Sorry about that. And Commissioner Jester?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries. And the vote is 7-0 to approve.
If we could make a quick clarification on the minutes, Commissioner Jester, I think on this one you would have to abstain because you missed.
You're right, I would.
All right, it's been noted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any written communications or oral communications on items not on the agenda?
None at this time.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to the public hearings. Our first item tonight is PL 22-0275. This is 528 West Washington Avenue. And if we could get the staff report or presentation from staff, please.
Yes, good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, fellow commissioners. I'd like to introduce myself.
Sorry.
My name.
Point of order. I just wanted to.
Sorry, I just remembered, I forgot to ask for disclosures. Anybody have any disclosures on this item? No. I do have a disclosure. I will have to recuse myself due to a financial conflict of interest. The applicant is a client of my company.
Yeah, and I have a disclosure as well. I am friends with the property owner. I don't anticipate that this is going to bias me in any particular direction, but I wanted to disclose that up front.
Good. You warmed the seat for me. Okay, I will open the hearing and have staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. Once again, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Vikram Chima. I'm a planning consultant with Rick Engineering, that's providing supplementary planning services to the planning department. And I've been the project manager on these entitlements since October of 2023. Tonight's Planning Commission item proposes the approval of the conversion of a short-term hotel with 75 rooms to single residential occupancy housing use with 86 rooms. The approval also contains a conditional use permit to grant a maximum density bonus of 11 units within the existing building footprint and a reduction in the minimum parking required for the site under Assembly Bill 2097. The project site has a general plan designation of general commercial and a zoning designation of general commercial. CG. The conversion of a hotel into a long-term single residential occupancy unit residential occupancy units is permitted in the CG zone through the hotel conversion permit via a major plot plan process and by meeting the required findings in the hotel conversion ordinance. The applicant also requests a reduction of the minimum parking standards as permitted via AB 2097 and its proximity to a major transit station. The 1-acre site is located at 528 West Washington Avenue. It is on the north side of the street between North Center City Parkway and North Quince Street. And it is developed with a 3-story, 33,911 square foot building, surface parking, signage, and trash enclosure. The project site is surrounded by similar general commercial uses to the immediate east and west of the site, as well as across West Washington Avenue to the south. A multifamily site exists to the north of the site. To reiterate, the applicant's request is to convert the existing 75-room short-term occupancy hotel, less than 30 days stay, into a long-term single residential occupancy use, using the major plot plan process. The applicant also requests, through a CUP, conditional use permit, to allow the project to increase its existing unit count by 15%, in this case, 11 additional SRO units, resulting in a new total of 86 units. The project will not alter the building's existing height or footprint. The interior of the units will be upgraded with new materials and efficiency kitchens with small fridges, sinks, and cooking facilities. There will also be drywall repair, installation of energy-efficient lighting, and retrofitting units for modern internet and other connections. The project proposes to repair the existing roofing materials, repair existing plaster and finish as needed, retrofit the existing and relocate the existing trash enclosure, and also improvements to the pool and jacuzzi areas. So just to reiterate one last time, the request before the commission this evening is to grant approval of the major plot plan of the hotel conversion permit as element number 1. Element number 2 is the conditional use permit to allow for 11 additional SRO units, and to approve the reduction in the minimum parking required based on AB 209 and the project's proximity to the Escondido Transit Center, a major transit hub. The applicant does not propose any changes to architectural design or site design other than the relocation of the trash enclosure. Here's some street shots from looking northward from West Washington. The top photo captures the scale and the area of development along West Washington Avenue. And we can see that it's fairly variable. And we've got some 1-story, 2-story, and then we've got some 3-story buildings, including the existing hotel. The bottom photo showing the building's frontage and driveway entrance, as well as existing signage. Here we have a site plan on the project site and its surrounding uses. To the immediate east and west, it's oriented a little awkwardly here, but it would be immediately to the east and west are the existing commercial uses that are in place. The existing residential is to the north, and then we can't see it out of the frame, but to the south, additional general commercial. And we can see here in the upper right-hand corner the current location of the trash enclosure and its relocation just a few feet away, oriented towards the rear of the site, and will be assuming or locating itself within 2 existing parking spaces, which brings the total existing count based on the site right now, which is at 74, down to 72, which is what the applicant is requesting as their minimum parking requirement. There will be no other on-site changes. These are some existing elevations. Again, there's only going to be exterior work done as a function of repair, roofing materials, exterior plaster, paint, finishes, no additional new openings or relocated openings. We can see here the first floor plan of the site. We've got the entrance, which is oriented towards the parking lot here. We've got managers, an upgraded business center, upgraded lobby, a manager's facilities or room, and then we've got access to the pool and the jacuzzi here. And then in a C-shape around that area, we have the main building structure. It has 2 stairwells at the south and north ends of the site, as well as elevator shaft here in mid-site in order to facilitate movement between floors. And the first floor will come to contain 28 standard, single residential occupancy units. The second floor, we can see just the C-shaped building footprint, as well as an additional 31 SRO units. And the third floor configured to accommodate an additional 27 SRO units for a total of 86. Wanted to talk a little bit about the basis for the request on the reduction of parking, and it's in California legislation. Assembly Bill 2097, which was adopted January 1st of 2023. This Assembly Bill essentially allows uses within half a mile radii of major transit hubs or high-quality transit corridors to require no parking minimum. This site is within half a mile of a transit hub and requests providing the reduced number of parking spaces. It anticipates the use of the transit station as an alternative to vehicular modes, and therefore the conversion will not require additional parking. And here's some aerial photographs, and we can see the main photograph is of the pedestrian or the walking path between the building entrance and the entrance to the transit hub, which is at about a half mile, 0.5 miles exactly. It's actually a little less in lineal feet, and the Assembly Bill does direct that we use lineal feet or radii between sites to determine distance. So we're well within our half mile range, excuse me, of the site to a major transit hub. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about these single residential occupancy units. These units will not be used as transitional housing, rather they are viewed as market rate studios, and their leasing will require an applicant to provide financial data that demonstrates their ability to pay monthly rent. These units are not subsidized, or are they subject to any affordability covenants. The project is categorically exempt pursuant to CEQA guidelines sections 15.332 infill development projects. A notice of exemption will be filed with the county clerk. And finally, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt resolution number 2024-11 approving PL 22-0275, PL 24-0105, and the environmental determination made for the project. And there's also one other key item to mention. There's a memorandum in front of you that is removing, the applicant requested to remove some conditions from the project, which it was not subject to. The project scope did not necessitate the use or the implication of the conditions related to landscaping, so those have been removed per the applicant's request, per the project scope.
Just a quick clarification also for the first item for the specific planning division condition, it's actually page 48 and C. We can just add that.
Thank you.
Thanks, staff, for the report. Does the Planning Commission have any questions of staff?
Thank you for staff report. That's great. Appreciate that. I do have a couple of questions. Is the building going to be occupied during the conversion?
I would probably defer to the applicant on that question. I know currently it is occupied. The new owners, the transition from old ownership to new ownership occurred in May of 2022, so it's under new ownership right now, pending the approval of this entitlement. So right now, ownership is operating as it has in increments of 30 days or less. They're no longer operating as anything but a short-term 30 or 28-day kind of monthly lease at this moment, and that'll be converted to a long-term extension of above 30-day stay, long-term stays with the addition or the approval of the entitlement.
Is the applicant here?
Yes. Real quick, I spoke to Chair Weiler, and he mentioned we can have staff present, have questions directed to staff, followed by the applicant's presentation, and then questions directed to the applicant themselves.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that was, you did mention that they operate without subsidies.
I did. Yes, that is
Okay.
that is correct, and
I'll wait until the applicant is turned.
verify that absolutely.
Are there any other questions of staff? Barry?
A couple of questions I have. Can you explain a little bit of the form of ownership? These would be individual owners of the units, or would they not be?
It would still function as a rental unit that would have contractual obligations on a monthly basis for rent, and I think the term of leasing, I'm not completely clear on. I'll let the applicant respond to the anticipated term, but it would always be rental units, and they would be beyond 30 days of continuous habitation by the renter.
So the only condition would be that it be greater than 30 days of a rental. Is that correct? There's no limitation beyond that to qualify for this. It could be 31 days, for example, and that would qualify.
I think it would have to jump to 2 months as opposed to 31 days, but okay, I'll let the applicant speak to that particular point.
Okay. Help me understand, using the term market rate, how is in this case, this would be a rent. How would that rent rate be determined?
Market rate simply implies that it would be a function of demand for the units and the price point and inventory, basically. So there's nothing in place here. There's no covenants. There's no level of affordability that these units are ascribed to or that they're dedicated to as a form of affordable housing. They're simply at rate. They're determined by the market for these types of spaces for individual use. So essentially it's without subsidy, without any kind of intervention of government or otherwise, as far as the transaction is occurring. So it's really just a sense of, it's like any other kind of multifamily project that you would have, a rental or a long-term rental with a 6-month or a 12-month leasing agreement.
So the rate is set by the owner of the property without any other input from any other entity?
My understanding is, yes, it's simply a function of what the owners and operations believe is appropriate for the site and what the market dictates.
I will. Okay. Currently, the current status, do we have any information on the aggregate economic impacts to the city on this transition? We go from elimination of the TOT, I assume.
That is correct. There is part of the conditional use permit, the hotel conversion permit findings do require an explanation or a financial analysis of any kind of change. And there was a qualitative analysis. It's actually attached to your staff reports of the impacts of the transition of this use from temporary hotel type use to a longer term use. And I believe it's attachment number 2. That goes through kind of a qualitative analysis, and again, the applicant can kind of speak to this a bit further. But in summary, we feel, and the applicant feels, staff feels, and the applicant feels that the financial benefits to the city of the conversion of this project or the entitlement of this project would outweigh any kind of financial impact from its current what it currently economically generates. And the applicant will get into kind of the process that she went through to kind of qualitatively exemplify how this is going to be a net positive gain for this city when it comes to the financial benefits. But essentially, yes, Commissioner, I'm sorry, there's a qualitative analysis, and we feel that there is a positive fiscal benefit from the loss. But we do address the acknowledgement and the loss of the transit-oriented tax.
The increase, these were pretty small units to begin with.
They were.
And now we're talking about longer living times, essentially. Non-apartment, moving to more of a living condition, and we're shrinking the square footage of these units by going from, was it 76 to 80, or 86, something like that, the 11 additional units, shrinking the square footage and adding a little bit of kitchen space as well?
That's, I think, essentially the conversion. There's an average of about 321 square feet per unit, which is within the range of what we define as the range for a single-family residential occupancy unit. So there is an acceptable range in the zoning code, and 321 square feet is one of the room type options. I believe there's several room type options that range in size from, I think, around 300 square feet to up to like 350 square feet. I think I've got a slide for the room types, but yeah, essentially they're smaller studio units.
The parking, essentially we're adding 11 units to this without adding any additional parking, so we're going to less than 1 parking space per unit in the aggregate, is that correct?
That's what the request would be for. The zoning code would dictate that 96 units, if we were to follow the standard parking equation for an SRO site under the zoning code, we would need 96 units or 96 parking spaces. So there will be no increase in aggregates, and again, that comes from the proximity to the transit station and the shift from vehicular modes to alternative modes of travel.
Thank you.
Any of the other commissioners?
I have one more question with regard to Commissioner Spears' comment regarding the TOT. Is it I've read the quantitative analysis, economic analysis. I believe that was done by Stan's company. Is it the position that the offset in Escondido police calls offsets at TOT?
That was, so this is technically not a quantitative, but a qualitative analysis,
Oh.
yeah. So it's a little less definitive than a quantitative analysis would
Okay.
be. But the applicant took available data related to general, to call volumes for certain services, and that the reduction of the number of those calls after the new owners had occupied the site, and the reduction in calls to police and fire services for the site as the term of stay became up to 30 days, where it is right now, and then eventually will extend beyond that 30-day stay. As we begin to extend the stay, it was found, and with new ownership, it was found that there was a significant decrease in service calls, which is one element in the qualitative analysis. There's also the elements of the increase in permanent residents for sales tax, and then also the TOT. So actually those two elements. So the reduction of the TOT would be offset by the increase in permanent residents and local spending and local job production, as well as the reduction in city services to offset the loss of TOT.
Thank you for that. I do have one more question. I'm a little confused about, there's a new owner, Vista International?
Correct.
Is that the name of the company? Yeah. And so you purchased the property, or it's pending approval of this, or what? Can you go over that again?
Yes, yeah, I believe it's yes, confirming here with the applicant, and as it's stated in the qualitative analysis, it was purchased in May of 2022 by Vista International.
Okay.
And then continuing operation within the scope of what you were able to do there, which is a short-term, as a short-term occupant.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stevie?
Two things. One, I have to apologize to the commission. I got my item agendas mixed up. I'm actually not related in any way to this particular owner or this party. It's the next item, so table that. I have a question for staff regarding this, the parking, specifically with respect to the notion that someone who leases a studio at this place will not own a car. In the city's experience and the staff's experience approving similar projects, has it been the case that the lack of a parking space has resulted in people walking to a bus station?
I'm going to defer to Principal Planner Romero?
I wouldn't say that we can confirm that from the information, but what we are doing is adhering to state law, which permits this by being within a half-mile of public transit. And so that's all we're doing here with this project.
Okay, but to confirm, the city cannot weigh in, there's no experiential knowledge of this or data around this?
I don't have anything to speak to say that that runs hand in hand at this time.
Owen Tunnel, Assistant City Engineer. We have, maybe in the last 2 to 3 years, we've approved other projects in the vicinity of the transit center that, have a less than city requirement for parking. And some of those are less than 1 space per unit. But the problem is they haven't been built and finished yet, so we can't really, we don't have any anecdotal experience yet as to how that's really working. But we hope to in a few years here as these projects build.
And has the city received any kind of communication from any of the businesses proximate to this project, businesses specifically that do own parking lots proximate to this project?
There was no public comment that was received by myself, the project manager, or by the planning department, who would otherwise.
Okay, and has the police department prepared any kind of statement or given us any kind of information as to the safety of the walk from this particular project to that transit station for, say, a single woman who's walking by herself in the evening to go to the grocery store from this place to the transit station?
Earlier in the process, PD was consulted, and the applicant again can probably elaborate, but the original notion of the decrease in call volume after the change in ownership came from data related to the police department, and that data was reflective of a reduction in service calls and calls related to domestic abuse or drug and alcohol abuse.
But that's on the subject property.
That is only a subject site. There's, PD was conducted. They have been contacted. We don't have a representative available, unfortunately, but they are aware, and we cannot speak to the relative safety of pedestrian safety from that particular stretch. But generally, the site itself has shown an improvement in overall operations and a reduction in the need for service.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
I think to answer your question, I think it's within a public transit. I think there's a bus like every 15 minutes. I think I read that somewhere. So that kind of offsets having to walk to the transit station.
In this particular
I think
case,
that's one of the requirements for the waiver of the additional parking.
yes, you can potentially appeal to 2 possibilities: either proximity to a stationary transit hub like the Escondido Transit Center, or proximal relationship to a high-quality corridor. And West Washington Avenue, I believe, would meet those criteria. Right now, we're working with just the original criteria being within a half mile, but I think if we were to explore the breeze sites, that West Washington Avenue would qualify as a high-quality transit corridor. So that's a very perceptive way of thinking about it, actually.
Any further questions? Commissioner Spear?
Another follow-up question. Nothing is, and this may be an owner question, but there's nothing that prevents the sale of this by the current owner after entitlement, correct?
Don't believe so, sir. No. The entitlement would be part of any sale and would run concurrently and in perpetuity with the property, or as long as it was effective, but yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Any further questions? You again?
Sorry. I'm new to this, so I apologize for my ignorance, please. The use permit. There's no signature block on it. Who signs it?
I mean, I would interpret that, I can hand it over to Oscar, but the resolution itself would be, I guess, the binding document that would have this body's signature as assenting to approval of the resolution.
But the resolution would be a city thing. The conditional use permit would be something different, and the applicant would not be required to sign that? I don't know. I'm
If I can just clarify that what this body is being asked to do is to approve the conditional use permit. That would be an entitlement that would run with the property. So there's no, regardless of who actually signs the document, this body is tasked with approval or denial of that conditional use permit.
Thank you.
Additional questions? I have a couple. Commissioner Spira mentioned kitchen space. Is there kitchen space available in these units?
There is.
Okay.
It's at the moment it doesn't have these particular facilities as described in the document, but after the conversion, the units would have the additional countertop, the additional high efficiency efficiency units, kitchens, and so on, as was described earlier. So after the conversion, all of these amenities will be available to the unit.
Has the city had other motels converted into these type of units that we can compare apples to apples?
I'd have to defer on that particular question.
I know we had one maybe within the a year or so. I joined the city in December, so I can't speak to that.
Owen, do you have a response?
Yeah, I believe Interfaith, a few of their rooms operate with their own kitchens, but that's kind of a whole different project, and most of the rooms, weren't converted the same way. I can't think of another SRO thus far.
Could you clarify for me, go back to why the applicant is now requesting the landscaping conditions being removed?
That was the project scope, essentially, as I interpreted it and as staff originally interpreted it, was simply that was mistakenly interpreted as triggering a landscape requirement for the current scope of work.
So it was overkill on our part? Okay, very good. Okay, unless there's any additional questions, I'll invite the applicant to come up because I know there's a battery of questions that the commissioners have. Oh, yes.
Hi, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Sally Schiffman. I'm with WSM Land Development Solutions. I was previously with HWL, so you'll see my name on a lot of those documents. And I am continuing to represent the applicant, Vista International, and Mr. Scott Tulk, who's here tonight with us as well. So between him and I think we can answer all of your questions. I do have a short presentation, which will now be even shorter because staff did a great job of going through all of these items. But this also includes some photographs, and I think that'll help you kind of get an idea of what these units look like and what's happening already at the site. And then I will do my best to answer the questions already presented, and then if you have anything else, I can certainly speak to those as well. Okay. So a little bit of background on Vista International. It is a privately owned company. They have been established in California since 2013. They are a multifamily property owner and operator. So they currently own 13 properties throughout California, over 1,200 units. This includes one already in Escondido, the Estancia property at 725 North Fig. And then Vista Cove, assuming it's approved, this would add one property and 85 leasable units and one manager's unit to their portfolio. Since 2017, they have started exploring and implementing these SRO conversion projects. They have successfully gotten entitlements on and began operating in the cities of Chula Vista, El Cajon, Oceanside Vista, and San Diego. Those properties are running successfully or on the brink of opening in Oceanside and Vista, and they have all been seen as a positive improvement, not just to the property itself, but to the surrounding neighborhood as well. So I like to start my presentations on these SROs with sort of the basics. The questions that you all have on what this looks like and what this means to have an SRO unit is very common. We get this question every city, which is why I already have it as a slide. The basics of SROs. These are units that they are not transitional housing. They are not supplemental housing. They are not supportive housing. They are market rate studio apartments. That's how they operate. They are all required to comply with the efficiency dwelling unit standards of the California Building Code. And as part of that, all units have to include a bathroom, a refrigerator, a sink, some sort of private storage closet or cabinet. It's basically space for self-sufficient living. So that's all within these smaller spaces. It's really the most basic form of housing. So these are a lower cost option for individuals like students, military veterans, seniors, young professionals, maybe one or two individuals in a unit. The size of the unit really kind of limits what can happen there. And it just is simply a lower cost option versus maybe a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. Typically, these are very supportive of cities' housing elements. They contribute towards housing needs, again, of these lower income demographics. They count towards your total number of housing units, but again, these aren't deed restricted or subsidized in any way, and so they don't typically count towards your affordable unit numbers. They do create stable and secure housing. So a lot of times, under previous uses as hotels, you see a lot of people coming and staying for 1 or 2 nights. Maybe they're using housing vouchers that they're coming in, and property owners, hotel operators are selling these rooms for $130, $150, getting reimbursed by the state or the county or whoever. And people are coming and going regularly. It's not stable, it's not secure, people don't have ownership over their space. And companies like this International, they actually require a minimum of 6 months lease. That is their business model. And after a successful 6 months, they up that to 12 months or more. So that is their model. They like long-term year leases or more. And then finally, tenants here, they do have to apply for credit and background checks. So again, operates just like an apartment building would operate. Staff already went through a lot of these, so I'm going to just kind of leave this slide up for a moment, but this is an image, a current image of the front of the building. There will be some repainting to be done. They have not changed the signage yet. All of the signs will be rebranded, so they're not putting new signs, new actual structures in, but they will reface all of the signs. Landscaping, that question, while we're not subject to a landscape plan, the site is already landscaped, and the owner does have plans already in the works to enhance the landscaping. And along the front of the portion of the building facing Washington, the plan is to make it less inviting to transients. So that has been, we know, a problem throughout the city. So that's already in the works, and all of that will be in coordination with the city. So, okay. Interior renovations. This is a picture of one of the rooms that has already undergone some upgrades. So all the rooms would be assessed and updated as needed, new paint, flooring, drywall. All of the units would get their efficiency kitchens installed. In addition, as an amenity, I'll go through shortly that there are going to be 3 common use full-size kitchens available in this building as well, which allows people to, if they wanted to host a holiday or a birthday or something, they would have access to that. But that's not their only source of cooking facilities. They would cook in their room, in their space, and then they could, rent these or secure them for the day or whatever if they wanted to use those. And the laundry room will be updated as well. Bathrooms will be updated. The lobby has already been renovated. Any AC units that need to be replaced will be replaced. Pest control treatments, of course, will continue as they are. amenities. So here's a picture of the pool as it exists. I believe repairs have already been undertaken at the pool. It's consistently maintained. There is an on-site shared laundry facility. We anticipate 5 washers, 5 dryers. Those are provided by a third-party vendor, and that's determined by demand and need. Managed utilities, water, sewer, trash, electricity. This site, in support of acknowledging that there's limited parking on site, and we are within that distance, half mile of transit, the applicant has agreed to provide credit for transit passes. So somebody, if a resident wanted to buy a pass, they could be credited on their rent. We also have ample bike storage. We have 2 different bike storage rooms on the first floor, both of which will have bike repair stations in them, and there is space for 86 bikes. And then for those that do have vehicles or need parking, we would have assigned on-site parking. The security system will be updated. They already are under contract with a security company, Eagle Patrol. Goes out every night. They go about 5 times throughout the night and on the weekends as well. There's also going to be live-in site management. So one of the units will be a manager's unit, and they will be there full time. There's the resident lobby. So this has actually already been done. So that picture is what exists. There's an on-site business center, and again, those full-size kitchens. So what really sets this apart from how it was operating previously as a hotel is how the property is managed. So Vista International has been doing this a long time. They have partnered with Borba Property Group locally. That's the picture you see here is the Borba Group. All of their properties have site-specific operations and maintenance plans. A draft of that has been provided to staff, and it is accessible at all times, and it is updated regularly. There's also that full-time live-in manager with office hours through the week. And then what's very unique, I believe, with Vista International is that they have an in-house management team, and it really is operates as a pyramid or a tree. So Scott here acts as general manager. He then has a regional manager for Southern California. That then is broken down into the county level. There's a manager or supervisor for North County and South County. Then, of course, you have your site manager. You have a site-specific maintenance team. So when anything goes wrong, they call their maintenance team. And then there's also a 24-hour call center. So anytime a resident has issues, they can call that call center, and it actually goes to a human person. So it will go up this chain until a person answers. It can be Scott in the middle of the night, and he will figure out what needs to happen to address the concerns of that resident. And then we have the Borba Property Group. They really do all of the supporting management. So they are the ones that collect rent. They do all of the HR maintenance or oversight. And then they also are doing all of the background checks and credit checks, et cetera, for their lease agreements. So project benefits, to kind of bring this all together. Again, the shift from transient occupancy, short-term lease hotels to longer-term, 6 months plus lease under a property management company that knows how to operate these multifamily apartments, under an owner that has been doing this for many, many years and does this all over the state with over 1,200 units. You have your operations and maintenance plan, and the property is properly managed. It provides that lower cost, stable, long-term living accommodations for the demographic that may need it in the city of Escondido. It reduces costs associated with calls for public service. As was stated in the financial assessment or the economics assessment, we did have real hard evidence that in the year prior to the first year of operation under new ownership, calls dropped by 55%. And we see that over and over and over again. In some cities, we see drops into the 90% range from previous use to new use. Again, this can contribute towards your goals for your housing element. And then with all of the updates that are proposed for the site, we do believe that it enhances the neighborhood, just sprucing up a previous use that may have been kind of starting to get a little shabby. So that concludes my presentation. Going down the list of questions. Well, let me pause there, Vice Chair.
Perhaps I should ask each commissioner to reiterate the questions they had.
I wrote them down. I can go by the order in which they were asked.
Okay,
if
we can go,
that's-
there you go. Okay.
You can ask as many questions as you'd like. Okay, so Commissioner Jester, you asked if these units would be occupied during conversion. They will be. So this is very common. So they shift from 28-day leases to long-term leases. And they basically, as those short-term leases expire, they either move them to a new room or whatever, and then they go through perhaps by level or section or wing. They do stay partially occupied while these improvements are made to the building. This building will require fire sprinklers, so it will likely be a chunk of the building at a time, like a floor at a time. And again, no subsidies, so this is not deed restricted. These are not supplemented by government programs.
Is there a requirement for sobriety?
So all potential residents go through background checks and credit checks, and all state housing non-discrimination laws are followed.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose the straight answer is no. There's no personal choice criteria for use of, yeah.
I get it, but
Yeah.
I know there are other such places that have that as a requirement that do not receive
Yeah.
government subsidies.
Sure, sometimes it's maybe perhaps based in the property owner's beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
for example. Typical things that are checked for in background checks are going to be, gang affiliations, sex offenders, felonies, those sort of things. That's what could prevent somebody from being able to live there. But sobriety issues, I don't think that's on the list of things they check for. Yeah.
Yeah, you go. I just think the applicant should be allowed to proceed down to the last question. The last point.
Okay.
All right.
Commissioner Spear, you asked form of ownership. It is privately owned right now, and yes, all units would be only rental. Terms of lease, minimum 6 months and 12 months plus after that.
As determined by the owner. At least, those lease terms.
That is their business model. So that is what they do at all of their properties, yes. And it can be anything over 30 days. They find that 6 months and preferably a year or more is really just a better business model. Less paperwork. Help me understand market rate, and is there any other input from other entities? As staff explained, yes, market rate is simply what demand is and what people are willing to pay. So I believe the average rental rate for a one-bedroom apartment in San Diego County is somewhere around $2,200, $2,400 a month. The studio would be slightly less than that. It's very difficult to put an exact number on that simply because they aren't there yet. Some of their other units around the county can range anywhere from $1,400 to $1,800, somewhere in that range. Aggregate cost to city. I would like to get through the other questions and then we can revisit the TOT versus expense, if that's okay.
I'm fine with.
Living longer in smaller units, shrinking unit size. So the property, we are not reducing the size of any of, we are only reducing the size of one unit. There are actually already 85 units existing on this property. The 75 number comes from what was approved. So the site was approved back in 1988 with 75 hotel units. Let me make sure my math is right. 10 of them were like family suites. So they had 2 rooms and they were connected. At some point over the last 30 years, 40 years almost, property owners have divided those rooms. So there are 85 existing rooms. We're taking one and splitting it. And staff could speak to this as well, but there are code restrictions on how small and how large units can be. And so the unit that we're splitting was actually too large to use as a studio. So we had to split that. That's where those numbers come from. And I do have a slide. I believe it's a few down. I have a slide on unit layout, I suppose. So there you go. So yeah, they range in size from about 300 to 350 square feet. Parking, I could certainly speak to that. I feel like perhaps staff has answered that, but yes, I mean, there are 74 parking spaces existing. With the reconfiguration of the trash enclosure to meet current standards, we may lose 2, we may also be able to keep them. It kind of depends on how and where we can situate the new trash enclosure. So 72 would be the least number of parking spaces, 74 would be retaining what's existing. Commissioner Chester, you talked, I will revisit your question about the offsetting of the loss of the TOT. Yes, Vista International did purchase the site in May of 2022, at which time we did initiate this process. So it's been a little bit of a long process. Commissioner Stevie, parking. Why would we assume renters did not have cars? So, you know, we are restricted on parking. That's the number of parking spaces that are there. We're not changing the building. We're trying not to change the way in which it's been operating for 30, 40 years. We are trying to provide the credit for transit passes. We would encourage that. Certainly we do provide the space for the bike storage indoors with those bike repair stations. We do find that with the conversion of these hotels to residential and the long-term leases, we get residents that take more ownership and pride in their area, and that tends to kind of spill over to the surrounding neighborhood. So we hopefully would find that, like, there was a question as to safety in the area. We don't always have control over other people's behaviors, but when there's people there regularly and they know their neighbors and they see who's coming and going, it really does help. It kind of puts more eyes on the community, right? And so we believe that walking will become safer. And it is less than 10 minutes of a walk. It's a 5-minute bike ride. It's a 2-minute car ride to get to the transit center. There's a lot within a half mile, which is considered nationally kind of the acceptable walking range for people. It's about a 10-minute walk is a half mile. That gets us all the way over to City Hall, gets us up to Lowe's, gets us over to that transit center. Lots of shopping, lots of jobs, lots of recreational activities within, and all sidewalks, all intersections with lights and crosswalks already existing. Commissioner Spear, you asked whether or not this project could be sold after entitlements. Yes, it could. However, that's not the intent of the owner. They've invested 2 years at short-term lease, which is not their business model, but they've done it. And they would like to be able to get this converted and continue operating as an environment. And then Vice Chair Barber, are there kitchens in the units? Yes. Other SROs, my understanding is that the city did approve one about a year ago off of Escondido Boulevard down near it, I think. But my understanding is it was a pretty different scenario. So I don't think it's going to give you This is kind of the first one of this type that's coming through the city. Understandable for all these questions. And then I believe we've answered the landscaping issue. And then Commissioner Jester, you had asked regarding the CUP. I believe staff was able to answer that for you. Those were all the questions I had written down. If I missed anything or if you have additional questions.
Commissioner Jester?
Thank you for answering our questions. Appreciate that. You know, I did want to comment, or whatever it's where staff had a route to transit. I think it was west on Washington, left at Quince, down to the, is that correct?
Yes, so those, I provided those to staff. You could use the ones I have with you.
I think that.
So those were based on Google Maps.
Right.
So those would be, you know,
That would be the
the
fastest way
recommended
to-
or the fastest, correct.
Right there on Quince, Skyline Recycling has an operation, which is an absolute magnet for homeless people. It is not a safe walk by any stretch of the imagination. There are constantly police activity there. I go by there all the time. It's always. So it's not a safe walk. It may be 10 minutes, it may be half a mile, but it's there needs to be, you know, some neighborhood improvements there, for sure. One other question that I did have, when you're talking about, I saw the floor plan, I'm curious about the efficiency kitchens that Vice Chair Barber brought up. Are you talking about an all-in-one little, you know, that has the sink, the all-in-one little units that they have that they're putting in nowadays? It's got a sink, it's got a little, couple of,
My name is Scott Tulk, and I work with Vista International. So to answer your question, our model currently is they have a counter space with kitchen sink cabinets at the bottom and the top. It's not like a bar fridge; it's a fridge that always stands out here on me.
yeah, that's what it looked like from the drawing. I was just
Right.
curious because they're calling these little efficiency kitchens are about as big as an oven, and you know they serve the entire purpose of the sink.
They're larger than that.
Yeah.
For these units, there's also, are these going to have the small 2 burner tops? So each unit would have a 2 burner stovetop and small oven. So you can actually, you know, in theory, you can cook whatever you need to,
Yeah, it
and there's a sink and
looked like
cabinets.
they were set in cabinets.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it's larger than that, and then, yeah, it's about a 4-foot fridge. So it's not like a little mini fridge.
Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome.
Thank you for following up on my question. Do you have any follow-up questions? No other questions?
Yeah, I have some follow-up questions. First one is bike utilization. So you're putting in 2 bike stations. You said it could hold 86 bikes. Why?
That is a code requirement that there is 1 bike parking space per unit.
Okay.
So
Is that our code?
it is.
Look at that. Do you, or Scott, are you the owner, Scott? You work for them, okay. Have you found that the bikes are utilized in your other properties throughout the county?
We've never been asked to put maybe that many, but certainly yes, a lot of our residents ride bikes.
So I'm going to ask you the question now that I asked poor Oscar over here. What have you found experientially setting up these units in other parts of the county? What have you found with respect to cars? Do people need 1 spot per unit? Approximately what percentage of your units on average utilize the parking?
I guess it would come down to if it's available,
Mhm.
you would be able to rent a unit with a parking stall. If it's not available, it would be like if you wanted 2 bedrooms or 1 bedroom. If it's available, we could rent that to you, but if we don't have a spot to assign to you, we wouldn't be able to rent you a unit, so it would be your preference.
Got it. So, okay, so that's new information to me. So the parking is assigned
Yes.
based on availability. Okay. So if somebody needs a parking spot and there isn't one available to them, are they still able to rent from you?
They would be able to, but they wouldn't be able to park on site.
Okay. So what has been in your other properties, what has been your experience with people and their cars if they're not able to park them on property? What has been the impact to local businesses or to congestion on the street?
That's a really good question. I don't know if, I've done 4 of these in El Cajon, and I don't think it's like, from memory, I don't remember it ever coming up as an issue, so I'm not sure how to answer that.
Okay. My next question is, you made mention of making the part of the property that faces Washington less hospitable, or I can't remember the exact terminology you used, it was very polite, to the transient population. What does that mean?
That would be things like removing the grass, putting down more xeriscape, rocks, cacti, succulents.
So in your estimation, do you believe that after this has all occurred, the curb appeal will be better, worse, or the same than present, and why?
Better,
Why?
because it's important to their business as well, and they want to make sure that their site is maintained and well cared for, and it's not at all in the best interest of the business owner to encourage transient use of that site.
Sure. And I get that. Like, obviously, having transient use of that whole area is a problem. But where I'm going is you can achieve that by putting up sort of brutalist concrete architecture that is low maintenance and not conducive to sleeping on and that sort of thing.
We still have to meet the city requirements for landscaping.
Okay, so the
We actually
strike
are-
through here doesn't remove that requirement, because I was reading this as this might be an exemption pursuant to housing requirements or whatever exemptions you're entitled to as a result of. So there's still landscaping requirements in place?
But the landscaping initially was not going to change what was already existing. They're just changing it out to more drought tolerant landscaping than what they currently have.
Okay.
So they're still consistent with the requirement for the original landscaping that was there.
Okay, well, that's all I have.
Oh, yes, TOT. Thank you for the reminder. Okay, so you do all have a copy of the economic and demand analysis that was done. It was a more qualitative approach than a full-blown economic study, which was quite cost prohibitive for such a small site. The numbers that, let's start with TOT. I was only privy to numbers provided to me for current circumstances from my client. I did work with Veronica Moronis, the city planner, she obtained the TOT numbers for the previous owner and provided me with this information that simply, she did not give me numbers, she simply said, prior to COVID, the site was operating and resulting in a higher TOT than what currently is collected. And then during COVID, that number dropped and was comparable to what we see now from this property owner. So under the new circumstances on these 28-day rental situations, they do bring in approximately $9,800 a month. That equates to about $118,000 per year. I then went on and looked at real numbers from the police department. That's where you see this reduction in calls from an average of 3.7 per room per year down to 1.7 per room per year. I then, very back of the napkin, I did look up the fiscal year budget for the police department for 23-24, and then I looked at that in comparison to the actual number of calls from the previous fiscal year, and I rounded down. So it came out to approximately $1,000 per call. That is a very, very large estimate. Calls are probably not $1,000 per call, it's probably much less. So this is the entire budget of the police department broken down into calls. Obviously some calls are much more extreme and others are nothing, right? It's just a drive-by. But given under that circumstance, $1,000 per call, that's it reduced by 168 calls, that equates to $168,000. In that scenario, the change of use over to a more stable living situation at this site results in an approximate $50,000 a year savings. That's how I came to that number. So the savings in calls for service was approximately $170,000. And the TOT collected under new ownership is approximately $120,000.
I need a clarification on that, though. Are you anticipating additional reduction in calls, or are you saying presently that's the number, and that's the number you're using for your math?
We would hope to see a slight decrease still in calls, but that 1.7 per room per year is very much in line with any apartment building. So I also provided the numbers for their other site, Estancia, which comes in at 1.5 calls per room per year. So it's very much in line with what we would see in an apartment building. The types of calls are also very much in line with what you would see in any other apartment building.
But if nothing changed today, we would be at this reduction already.
Correct.
Okay.
That's where it is currently. And so with the loss of the TOT, $120,000, you're still saving $170,000 in reduction in calls.
You're saying that savings in calls is already occurring, correct?
It is, correct.
And so we are currently receiving TOT with those reduced call numbers.
Correct.
After entitlement, we would simply delete the TOT. So where's the savings?
So the business model of this property owner is multifamily. If the project was not to be approved, it is very likely that they would sell the site and it would revert to a hotel operation because we are asking for the hotel conversion. If that's not approved, it would simply go back to being a hotel. And at that point, that's not their business model. They would sell the site, it would go back to being a hotel. You potentially have the opportunity to continue to get that TOT. You also run the risk of having those calls increase again, which then, of course, increases the calls for service.
Is there a property tax increase component to the conversion?
I don't know. We don't have that level of detail. We'd have to, I didn't have it available last year when I was going through this because they hadn't owned for a year yet. They didn't have their property taxes yet. I'm sorry, I don't know.
That
I
could
would imagine.
That could factor into Commissioner Spears' question regarding the revenue.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
I'm not sure that the conversion would trigger something like that. It's been my experience.
Do you have any, I'm sorry, Oscar, or any staff, do you have any information on when a project gets transferred from a commercial use to a residential use, is that going to affect their property values and property taxes?
No, the only thing that I can think of is possibly if the units that you mentioned earlier were not captured, that they would be captured at this time.
Any other questions? And I thank you for a very good presentation. In fact, all my follow-up questions were crossed off my list as you spoke.
I do what I can. Okay, thank you. And if anything else comes up, of course, we're here.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll open this up for Planning Commission discussion.
I appreciate the thoughtful presentation that was given. I also appreciate, I have a sense based on what you said that there's good management. At least it sounds that way, and good principles of management. There's already, apparently, reportedly, there's already a decrease in incidents. That's good management under the same model, frankly. So where I have a little bit of difficulty in this is that our job is to work on an entitlement that carries with the property and is not specific to management style. So our concerns need to be in that realm, where we're worried about, well, what happens if it's sold? What is the next owner going to be like? So I think my concerns are more with the entitlement itself rather than management style. The questions that I have, or maybe discussion points, I guess, for us, are that as I've tried to understand, it seems to me from what's been said, obviously this is new, sort of new to the city of Escondido. I know you have experience doing this, 4 of them in El Cajon and other parts. So I did a little research to try to understand, it's certainly not a new issue, even though it is to us. And as I read on this a little bit, there was something written on the history of SROs in the United States and also in California. And there are a couple relevant points, I think, to our deliberation that I wanted to mention. In the history, it's called Living Downtown, the History of Residential Hotels in the United States. The author states this: in the mid-1990s, many city health officials, architects, city planners, and politicians still argue that no one should live in SRO hotels, which are viewed as leading to severe social and physical maladjustment and public nuisance. And then, I guess in California, we had gone away from these. We had them previously because of social problems. In 1917, the state of California passed New Hotel Act that prevented the building of new hotels with small cubicle rooms. So part of my concern is, as we're dabbling into the idea of introducing something to Escondido here, based on track records, people found that this was problematic by experience, and to the point where they wanted to do away with it. So my concerns are, certainly I think the point was brought up that we're trying to move away from something that has been problematic. I think, though, that the benefits we're talking about have to do more with management style than they do with the form of this isn't that different, I think, in the form of ownership, because you're still rental units. If there's a change in ownership, then I'm concerned that that could go back to a very transient type of use, 31 days or more. So that's one of my concerns. I know the point was made that this could be a benefit to RENA, so I looked into that. And I don't believe it applies to us too much, because with RENA, I looked at our numbers for RENA, and the Sandag has instituted a priority system for Escondido based on issues that we have compared to the rest of the county and demographics. In our RENA allotment, they downgraded our allotment percentages for low income, and they upgraded our higher income because we are below average for the county. And so that goal was a policy implementation to try to get us to actually increase in our higher level, that's the focus there. So I looked at that and I said, okay, looking at the numbers that we received from the RENA allocation, what we actually have is a requirement for 32% low, 16%, and 52% in above moderate. So I wanted to look in the past 3 years, how have we done? How are we doing? Are we not getting enough? Do we need to try to augment that? We actually have, based on 21 to 23, 33% in low income has been approved in the city. 0% has been approved in moderate, and 67. I also understand from the staff report that this is not included in, this has not been included because it's hotel use. It's not included in our inventory. So it really isn't in the inclusion of the RENA numbers. So from that, I'm seeing that I'm not so sure that this is, there's really not a need for this to supplement our RENA numbers. The other, I guess I'm concerned with the loss of TOT. And I think from what's been said, it's clear that management style can make a difference in terms of the, I guess I have a little bit of issue with the calculation of the savings. I think about that and I say, okay, whether this happens or not, is there going to be an actual dollar amount savings to our police force? I don't think our operational numbers are going to change no matter what happens. So to say that that's really an offsetting savings for a loss of TOT, I really have a hard time with, no matter what happens. I just don't see how that would pan out to savings financially for the city. It certainly is a guaranteed loss of TOT. So I ask, does the city of Escondido need more low-income housing? Do we need this kind of development downtown? Do we have enough? Or is this something that's a benefit versus the cost? Because it certainly is a cost. Those are my thoughts.
This is market rate, not low income.
That's true. That's true. It isn't comparable to saying this is going to boost our low-income numbers. I guess when we take into account what we're getting, or what we would get from this, is we're getting single occupancy units. All of them are single occupancy units. So the question is, do we need more single occupancy dwellings that are potentially transient in nature, 31 days, 6 months, as opposed to units that would be permanent?
In my experience with designing multifamily projects, a 6-month lease is a very standard first run or more. So I don't really understand if we allow multifamily units to replace SRO. I don't get the argument, is what I'm saying.
Well,
micro units are very much going to be, the future. It is already happening in San Diego, where we do these smaller units with smaller kitchens, and conversions into that.
So the concern I have, certainly people do this. Cities are doing it. It's been done in California before. After it was done in California, they reversed that idea, finding that it invited problems. It brought problems to California. That's why they changed the law in 1917. That's why these people are writing that across the United States, there are many that believe it's not a good idea based on their experience of what it brought to their places.
I would say that in my projects that I'm working on, we are designing a lot of studio apartments.
But what's the impact? When this development, for example, was 1988, it's been 20 plus years. I know there's, looking back at the report, it talks about, well, there's been problems, there's been calls. It's not always anticipated what's the next 20 years going to pan out for this project. Going forward, would we say, looking back, gee, that was a good idea or not? I think we have to be long-term looking forward to say, what's the impact of Escondido? How is this going to impact Escondido for the next 20 years?
With respect to your argument about, I'm just not convinced that this particular project or any SRO project is going to turn out the way they have in the past. It was a different time, different people, different management styles. That's kind of a what if versus, well, what if it happens? But I think of it more in terms of what do we have now with that particular operation and its transient occupancy versus a longer-term occupancy. I mean, when you factor in, what, 10% to TOT tax for a, I think she said 130 a night, I think it was, something like that. You're talking about 2 nights, that's $26 a weekend. I mean, there's really not a whole lot of revenue that's being really lost. So I think it's good. I think it is good for the city. I mean, I see your argument 100%. I in your data, you did your research, and I can't, but that's a what if. I don't know.
Well, I suppose you could.
Anybody could buy the property and do whatever they want to with it. So maybe we ought to change.
Well, here's where I was going with this. You could say, well, compared to what's there, this is an improvement, and that would potentially be quite true.
Yeah.
But are those the only 2 options? When we institute an entitlement, that carries through, so that could preclude other options.
I also want to add, for years, I have been trying to put bike storage in my projects, and the fact that this is actually now a thing is fantastic. So just for your information, there are a lot of downtown San Diego buildings where a bike storage room is absolutely a necessity for people that live and work.
Downtown San Diego.
Yeah, within their.
Would you say that downtown Escondido is like downtown San Diego?
I think that we need to push more and progress more to get these concepts introduced to our city. And I think that we need to pave the way with certain things like this, adding, bike lanes, bike storage, fixing stations in these spaces so we can promote that type of lifestyle. A 15-minute lifestyle is the future. And those elements work towards that.
They can.
Yeah.
Or you have bike storage that nobody uses.
That's up to the individual person
Sure.
and their lifestyle and what, interests them. But to say that is, not giving someone that option is a good thing.
Oh, I'm not opposed to giving somebody the option to use bikes. I think the bike storage, the reason I asked about it was because I felt like it was an interesting addition. I wasn't aware that it was mandated by the city. But what I care about is what happens? Like, what's the data? So, I'm aware of the trends. What's the data here in Escondido? A city that has been built over 100 plus years, transitioned from agriculture into suburban bedroom community. What's the trend? If we take away parking, what are the alternatives? And how do people actually live? I like the idea of having a walkable community. I lived in one for quite a while. I'm less excited personally about a biking community, but whatever, that's just me, right? I don't want to impose my way of living. But it does. So one of the things I did after I saw this proposal was I just ran a simple calculation. I got on Google Maps and I said, all right, well, if I lived in this unit, all right, and I didn't have a car, and I had to rely on bus, and I wanted to go to Vaughn's up El Norte, right, get my groceries. What's the difference? Car ride, 6 minutes. Bus ride at that time of day, it was 4:30 p.m., was 30 minutes at a cost of $2.50 one way, $2.50, so $5 round trip. That's a gallon of gas. A gallon of gas should get you 25 miles in a car, get you 1.4 miles each way, 2.8. So there's a tax on that lifestyle that's a hidden tax that somebody who doesn't have a car pays. And I wonder if you live in these communities and you don't have access to a car, are you paying the tax? And what sort of lifestyle are we foreclosing on people by just not simply giving them a parking spot?
But in that argument, you're forgetting about the cost of the car, the cost of insurance, the cost of maintenance, and they're giving vouchers away for the bus.
Yeah, how much are the vouchers?
Right now, transit passes for bus and the Sprinter run anywhere from $20 to to $60 a month, depending on like if you're a student, if you're a senior, you know, how much you're going to use, how far you're going, et cetera. So there's a range, but we did look into it. So less than $80 a month.
There's also a really interesting trend that I'm starting to see in multifamily projects too, mostly down in more urban areas, where the lobbies will have the bus, they'll have like a TV and they'll have the schedules of everything that's happening. You know, so you walk in and you know immediately it's a transit-oriented development.
Right, and something like that would make a lot of sense to me. Like if we were talking about this project being on Grand, I would be pretty excited about it because I'd be like, awesome, we've got these people, they're right on Grand, drive foot traffic to Grand, which personally I would love to see, right? And something like that makes a lot of sense. Commissioner Jester brought up the safety of this particular part of town, and I'm worried about it, right? Like, will I walk that street at night? Yeah, but I'm a white man, 6 foot, on a good day, right? My wife wouldn't, and I think about that, right?
And I agree with that, but I also agree with when we start to elevate the buildings and concepts that are going around some of these rougher areas, there is a domino effect. Now, I totally get that this area is, you know, it has its issues for sure.
Yeah.
In a polite way of saying it. But we also have to think of how do we reduce that transiency that happens right there with.
Yeah, and it's pretty intense right there.
It is intense right there. And so when I see projects like this, you know, I personally believe that we have to be future forward thinking, that these areas can be cleaned up. And these are the steps to get there.
Well, the other challenge is that that specific area, and I see that, the other properties around it are more commercial in nature, right? You got the paint store that's been there forever and the liquor store across the street. So what other dominoes fall in that specific area to make this vision work? Thinking in like a 20-year vision.
I would say, I think what I've seen when I've had participation in areas that have not been nice and we've gone in and redeveloped certain multifamily units, it's usually food that follows. It's usually restaurants, things like that, that will move into the space, which brings more energy and livelihoods to the neighborhoods. Now, I can't say for certain, but that's typically what I've found in urban areas that I've been a part of development.
So this might be a question back for the city planner, but I understand that we do have some projects in the work up off of Center City where Mount Vernon Hotel is that correct? So Commissioner Maccaro was talking about restaurants being an accelerant to this type of lifestyle. Do we have any restaurants or anything like that planned just up the street from this development?
We have Dutch Brothers coming in.
We do have the Dutch Brothers, yeah.
Isn't there an In-N-Out going in there too? Like where the pho place used to be?
Not, I'm not aware of an In-N-Out coming.
Okay. I know with the HPC we had to go over something about that.
There's been, it
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that fell out. I was told that fell out.
Oh, it did? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we approved it.
We do have 3 other restaurants coming in that area though.
Okay.
Named.
Getting back to Commissioner Spears' point, with regard to a new potential owner of the property, we always do have provision, Chapter 15 of the conditional use permit, by which we can determine, or City Council or whoever can determine a modification, suspension, and/or revoking of the conditional use permit.
It's not a very effective mechanism.
It's not. It doesn't work for us very well either. So, but it is a prohibition.
I think the prudent thing to do is always to be careful with entitlements, because there is not a real good mechanism to go back and fix things.
Agreed.
And I just want to, I want to be careful that we realize that, we aren't limited to only the options that are on the table with entitlements. There are other possibilities that can occur as well. So.
Commissioner Spear, do you have any ideas? Like, when you say that, are you envisioning anything in specific?
I would love to see longer-term residents there. I think what Escondido needs is people that are really, to be honest with you, going to be people that want to live in Escondido. Do we need? We're really changing it from one form of renter to another form of renter. It isn't that different in use. Historically, there have been problems. We don't have a lot of track record in current days, but in past there have been problems with that kind of a situation in terms of saying, boy, is this going to get a lot cleaner? Is this going to clean up the neighborhood? Is this going to bring a whole new demographic? I just don't see that. So, we're saying, well, it's going to improve things a little bit. Okay, do we want to entitle it based on a little bit of improvement?
I find that interesting because, I mean, what other, you want to bring people to live in, I mean, we're already dealing with a difficult area. No one's going to build single-family homes on that lot. A improvement to a multifamily from a hotel that is already a downtrodden.
I don't know what anyone would try to do there. I wouldn't prescribe.
I mean, I think that's a little, what's on the table is we have an improvement in front of us.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Right. Let's be clear about that.
Yes.
It is an improvement in front of us.
That is correct.
To say that there's other options is simply not true.
No, I'm not saying there are other options. I'm just saying to say that those are the only two options that ever could be on that entitlement or that property is limiting that property.
Well, and that's an interesting tension, right? Because it's like, so you believe that renters will rent, but homeowners won't buy.
In that particular area, I think it would be a tough sell to find a developer to do a single-family home.
Yeah, what about condos? What do you think about condos? You work with them.
Yeah, so, I mean, townhomes are a thing right now, too.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big sell, condos, et cetera. But I think for this particular area of town, that a multifamily project
Ballpark.
is
Let's put a ballpark.
is in front of us
Lost those funds
today.
years ago.
And should they decide to sell in the future, then maybe that would work. But I think that topic is just kind of just too much of a.
I mean, I
if
think
it
you'd
doesn't
see,
make sense, right?
you wouldn't see owner occupants. You'd see investors buy them and put renters in, and you'd have the exact same use.
I was hoping Commissioner Spear was going to say pickleball courts for days. Instantly flips it.
Say that in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Commissioner, I just wanted to give the applicant a moment to respond to some of the comments and questions.
We'll allow a short response.
Thank you. I would like to say that we have done this in basically every other city that we've processed these. We are totally open to putting a term specified in the use permit. So we're okay. We would agree to a 6-month term if that would be helpful to Commissioner Spear and others for knowing that that use permit and these permits run with the property. That would give at least a little assurance to the commission that these would be long-term tenants.
Appreciate that. Would you be open to others as well?
Other conditions?
Yes, other conditions.
I mean, we would certainly need to hear them.
While I have you here, if I could ask, there was a point brought up on additional criteria for no, I don't know the screening process, but for better lack of a description.
So we have to follow state housing law, and that's what's followed. So I don't believe that something like requiring renters and market rate permits to be sober is an allowance by state law.
I don't know that it is. I think there was mentioned something of the owner's preferences that could be in place there.
Typically that happens when there's some sort of government funding involved that then has different stipulations. I don't know if the city attorney would be able to assist with that.
I think it's just the opposite. Government funding, there is no requirement for sobriety.
I would think it'd be the opposite as well.
Completely the other way around.
What's the required deposit, the minimum required deposit? Because that's kind of a way of measuring, right?
Scott may be able to answer that better than me.
City attorney want to address that?
Actually, I actually don't. I don't have an
Okay.
answer to that, and I apologize, but I
Okay.
just don't have that off the tip of my fingers.
In terms of deposit, as of July 1st, the maximum amount you're allowed to ask for is 1 month's rent. So it would depend on your credit score. So if you have good credit, you would qualify for a reduced security deposit. No credit or poor credit, then you would pay a full security deposit. Is how we operate.
Is that company policy or is that by law?
The maximum amount is law as
Okay.
of July 1st. Our policy is you're rewarded for good credit.
Okay.
I just want to add, these are market rate apartments. To require that anybody not be able to have a cocktail in their house if they want is ridiculous. Also ridiculous to ask of any other rental criteria. These are market rate apartments. Let's be clear on that. There should be no designation from this body of that, ever.
Well, we're asking questions.
My question was directed to the owner. It wasn't a question for us to consider. It was just, what's their business model look like? And if it were, you know, was there any kind of a requirement for that? I don't know. Like she said, that's a matter of your business model and your personal preference. I don't think it restricts anybody from having a cocktail or two.
There were questions brought up by one of the commissioners regarding RENA standards, goals, and how it affects this project in the community. So could staff please address that?
Oh,
I mean, so in the particularly the most relevant document that you would look to is the housing element when you're talking about affordable housing and your RENA numbers. In this particular case, what we're doing is in your housing element, we've identified special populations, certain groups of people that have difficulties in finding particular price points and rental units within the market. So although these are at market and they are apart from anything that is subsidized, anything that would be related to impacting or affecting your RENA numbers or bringing your RENA numbers down, providing either moderate or low or very low income units that would contribute to lowering your RENA numbers. That's not happening here. But conceptually, what you're doing is you're very much in policy alignment with your housing element, which is saying we need a diversity of housing options, and particularly calls out certain groups and demographics that have particular special needs. For instance, like the applicant was saying, disabled, elderly, single family. So there's a lot of groups that are actually technically called out as, the commissioner kind of brought up the point of the need assessment. And technically your housing element and your policies say this is something that you need. From the perspective of a policy statement, but as perspective of numbers and what RENA says, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment says, this is apart from that conversation. So really, we're dealing with a conceptual concept of policy alignment and providing housing that our housing element says we should have in the city, and then we have our technical RENA numbers and our affordable units and our covenant and deed restricted units that are contributing to lowering or achieving our RENA numbers.
If it was a part, it would have to be limited to that classification.
I think anecdotally or conceptually, these are comparable to what a moderate affordable income unit would be. I think they would achieve the same goals were you to look at the AMI, the average median income, and compare them. So conceptually, you can think about this as providing affordable options, but that's just kind of conceptually and as a policy statement. It's going to operate as an at-market rate. It's going to operate as been specified by the applicant.
Actually, another question has just come to my mind, kind of building off of Commissioner Stevie's question. So actually, you may need to come back up to the microphone, if not, perhaps even use. Yeah, perhaps. So, first, so you mentioned that the parking spaces will be assigned on a first come, first serve. Once they're filled, future applicants will just have to decide whether or not they want to commit themselves to a lease where they want to have a parking space, are your leases then going to deny them even to be able to have car ownership? Because I'm wondering about an applicant who says, well, I may not have a parking space, but I still have a vehicle, and I'm still going to utilize it. And then I'm wondering, as we've all seen apartment complexes in Escondido, especially where families are doubling up to be able to afford the rental rates, you're seeing overflow parking under the streets. So have you considered where this, if there's overflow parking resulting from the restricted or limited parking spaces, where that overflow parking might be, and where would their visitors park?
So there's 72 to 74 parking spaces available on site. If it's full, people would have to find public parking or come in through other means. Same for visitors. I mean, that's just how it would have to be. Hopefully, they're using the transit opportunities. There's ride share, there's bicycle, etc. I mean, our hope also is, you know, with every housing unit that goes in, we're able to get 2 families into 2 separate units versus 2 families in 1 unit. So a lot of the overflow parking issues that we're having is because we do have so many people living in too few units. And, you know, we truly do appreciate the concerns of these micro units, these small efficiency units, but we are finding that the model today is working. And there is demand for it. You know, privately owned company isn't going to go and establish themselves in a new location without having the knowledge that this is going to be hopefully profitable for them. So the need is there. The conversion of these hotels allows for a really efficient and fairly fast way of getting units on the market so people can start living outside of crowded environments.
Along those lines, what is your forecast for the demand? Because I'm actually not aware of how many studio-sized apartments we have in this city. So what are you guys forecasting in terms of occupancy on an annual basis?
They're already 90% occupied. And at their other facilities, there are wait lists. We have people calling before projects are even entitled. Demand is there.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Has staff considered where visitors might be parking or overflow parking might occur?
Of course, there's a consideration part of the original calculation that gives us, you know, what's required within the zoning code. But staff, I think, is in alignment with the applicant in our position that behaviorally we are seeing changes with these restrictions, and that we are seeing a mode shift when these types of projects occur. So, given the opportunity, people are taking the opportunity, and I think that can be said conceptually or statewide. You know, particular circumstances of this site, perhaps not so much, or to the degree that it's happening statewide or nationwide. But I mean, there is a mode shift, and it's measurable, and it's quantifiable in vehicle miles traveled and in all of the other thresholds and measurements we take related to project trips and additional trips that a project generates and all those factors. So,
Can I push on that just a little bit? The question was, has staff considered where people will park? The answer was, people will change. So back to the question at hand, if they didn't change, where would have we considered where they would park off-site?
it's been considered. I mean, we had to look at the context of the area to develop it, and we have to look at if there's already a parking lot that's within, you know, that half-mile radius or within proximity of the site. You know, does that provide us an opportunity to provide additional parking? I mean, it was certainly considered, absolutely.
Is there one?
No, there's not currently one, but as part of the proposal, nor is I believe they're a publicly or privately owned lot within that particular vicinity. So I don't think there's an inventory for us to tap into. But it's certainly something that could be explored to a greater degree by the applicant of their own volition.
I mean, the nearest big lot, I think, is the swap meet, right? Is that closed in the evening? Is there a gate? I don't know either.
Yeah, there's no street parking at all.
Thank you, Commissioners. Commissioner Stevie, you feel very strongly about the parking issue. Is this a deal breaker?
Yeah.
Would you support the project if we decline the parking reduction?
Well, yeah, potentially. Yeah, I mean, the fact that there's a need, it is wild to me that we're in a situation in this city where $1,800 gets you a hotel room. Like, my rent when my wife and I got married in 2011 was $1,000 in South Orange County, and we had a 1-bedroom apartment in a beautiful, well-maintained community. So, like, the fact that we're here and you're like building this place next to what has become a homelessness encampment, and you're going to get those rents, like, that's compelling. Whatever else is going on, that's compelling for me. Concurrent to that, Escondido is a commuter city, and I appreciate that we can change that potentially, but I'm not sure that this is the domino to push on. Like I said, I think if we're closer to Grand or some of these other places, I'm way more open to that. In fact, I'm excited by that idea. I'm just I'm on the fence. If you can't tell, like, I'm very on the fence.
So you're only talking.
May I ask?
Vice Chair Barber, Vice Chair Barber, could I think I need, because there's been such discussion about parking, I just need to reiterate state law here, because I think it's important that the Planning Commission is really aware that state law, AB 2097, which has been codified into the Government Code section 65863.2a, does state that a public agency shall not impose or enforce any minimum automobile parking requirement in a residential, commercial, or other development project if the project is located within half mile of a public transit center. So those are your restrictions that you're
So
working.
we don't have a choice.
That is a matter of state law.
Thank you.
Well, let me be super clear. So the state law says that the agency cannot impose it. It does not determine how this commissioner votes.
This is the agency that the state law is talking about.
Okay, but this commissioner can have his own reservations and vote according to that.
Oh, of course. I'm talking about.
Thirty of
I'm
us.
talking about what the plan.
So if we were to explicitly articulate that this is being shot down as a result of the parking matter, which has been imposed on us by people not here with no care whatsoever for the well-being of these citizens, then that would be a problem. But if we have our own total set of considerations, which ultimately cause us to vote no, then that is what it is.
This is a discretionary approval, so
The applicant would have to withdraw the condition of the about the parking. You could withdraw that, correct? You could say, no, we've decided we're not going to, we'll add extra parking.
I'm not sure we would be asking that question.
Oh, okay.
I think that's
Because
something
of the
that would have
parking
to come-
requirements be astronomical?
Well, I don't think we have, I let the attorney speak.
Yeah, wouldn't we be in shady grounds if we were saying, hinting we'll approve your project if you agree to increase the parking? Couldn't that be considered extortion if we were?
that's kind of the same thing, yeah.
There, oh.
Yeah, you cannot impose minimum parking requirements per state law.
And the project is meeting AB 2097.
But isn't there a requirement by the applicant to invoke that law?
No, that is state law.
So no matter what,
Yeah,
you get a pass.
that is correct.
It's more information as part of the staff report.
You're talking about 12 to 14% of the people in that building. It's very likely that 12 to 14% of the people living in a low-cost housing will probably not have a car, right? So how many of those 12 to 14 unit people do we think don't have a car, right? Maybe, let's say just for averages, 10%. So let's say 6 of them don't have a car. So really only talking 6 people that have to try to find parking. So we're not talking about a huge number of people. And they have a waiting list to get in buildings. So I don't think that's going to be a problem in my personal opinion. I think it's going to resolve itself. I totally appreciate what you're saying. I have like 6 cars. I need all the parking. But I don't think those people are going to have that problem.
Yeah, well, and again, so it's not just about whether or not people have cars. I view mobility as a multiplier effect for success in the long term. And ultimately, what I want to see is us architect a city where people have the opportunity to, A, live the life they want to live, but B, go up, right? And it's not clear to me that you can go up in a place like North San Diego County, specifically Escondido, without mobility at some point. I understand that you can take a bus. I would venture to say that of every individual in this room, something approaching 0% took a bus.
True. But you have 90% of the people there that have a car. And
Right.
you have probably 80% of those people that have cars more than the people that there now have cars. So it's a drastic improvement from what's there already.
Yeah.
Right? And you already are improving it far more than what we have.
Well, and I also want to be respectful of the fact that we're bumping up against a state law for which, if it's not already abundantly clear, I have very little regard. But I understand it is what it is.
I do want to tell you, when I lived in Portland, Oregon, I had a car up there, but I never used
Never
it.
used it, yeah.
Because I jumped on the
trolley.
thank you, I'm
Yeah.
like, whatever that thing is called, all the time. And it went,
Yeah, the trolley's great up there.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's all I did. And it was, I mean, granted, they've planned for that type of community, but
Right.
we're down here catching up.
I'll share with you an Escondido experience because my son got a job working in Oceanside as a lifeguard. And we had the blessed opportunity of living in Escondido where he could take the Sprinter over there. And his work was right by that, so he could actually use the Sprinter. One of the very few people that could actually use it to get to work. So it was wonderful. It was not wonderful. It was very unrealistic to the point where he ended up driving. So in the very best of terms and circumstances, it is not easy or convenient.
So I'm a parent of a student at Classical Academy, and when I drop my kid off at school and I drive down Valley Parkway, there are hundreds of children walking from the station to school that take this Sprinter every single day. So they've figured it out how to get back and forth. I know it's not great all the time, but I have kids that I coach football and baseball. They take the bus and the Sprinter to get to practice and to get to games. So it is a system that's working.
It is. But to say that to say that if we just give that as the only option for people, it won't work.
It's not the only option.
I understand.
It is not the only option. Let's be clear.
Well, and thinking about the future too, I mean, I actually believe the future is probably not buses and trolleys and all that. I think it's probably going to be subscription services to autonomous vehicles that pick you up, and it's going to be a fraction of the price, and we're probably 8 years away from that. I mean, if I'm candid, that's where I think it goes. And so in that way, I could see something like this working for people because they can just have their Tesla auto cab, as fanciful as you might believe that to be, come and pick them up. So, all right.
That a lot of residents that would live here would also use a rideshare program as well. No, I mean like Uber.
Like an Uber?
Yeah. But I think, to your point, I think that's a really excellent point.
But I want to be careful of, and maybe not germane to this conversation, this project, because it's a bigger topic. But, well, actually, I'll leave it at that. Probably don't need to discuss it. I'll just stick to this project.
Okay, so moving from that issue, Commissioner Spear had brought up the possibility of conditioning the project to require long-term leases, at least 6 months. The applicant mentioned that they would agree to that. So if the motion is made, would you include that? The motion to add a condition?
I find it personally favorable, but I won't be making that motion.
If discussion has concluded, is there a motion? I don't know if that's a positive or a negative sign.
When you responded, it sounded like you said you were open to putting something in there that said it had to be 6 months or more. Is that correct?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the project with the added condition that all future occupants must sign at least a minimum of a 6-month lease.
I'll second.
Okay, before I call for the vote, since I'm sitting and somebody else is voting, why should I move back to my seat to vote?
You'll be perfectly fine right there. Take care.
Thank you. Oh, I also want to say, I've seen Barry stuff. This guy was born to be a lifeguard. He's the most handsome person you would ever see. He's from Hollywood casting to be a lifeguard. Okay, go ahead and call for the vote.
And voting has been opened. Thank you. I'm unable to display the votes, but the vote is 5 to 1 with a nay from Commissioner Beresford. To approve the project, sorry.
Okay, so project was approved with that condition. This closes this item. I'm going to call for a recess before the next item's up. I'm sorry. And I feel sorry for the chairman. He missed the best discussion and debate I have heard in 2 years amongst the commissioners. That's breakneck.
Thank you, staff and the applicant. Thanks, the commission.
All right, it looks like we've got everybody back, so we'll go ahead and restart the meeting. That moves us to item number 3, which is PL 23-0299, that's 610 Metcalf for Hazaway today. Staff presentation, please.
Good evening, Chair Weiler, Vice Chair Barber, and Commissioners. My name is Melissa DeMarzo. I'm an Assistant Planner with the City of Escondido. And the second hearing item before you tonight is a request for a conditional use permit allowing the operation of a 10-day exempt transfer facility for household, universal, and e-waste. The project site is an existing developed industrial parcel located in the M2 zone with the general industrial land use designation located at 610 Metcalf Street. The site is located adjacent to other industrial uses, including a landscape company to the north, a solid waste facility to the east, an industrial building contractor to the south, and an unused industrial parcel and auto repair shop across the street to the west. And as you can see here, these images show current views from the property in all directions. The property site is located in the hazardous chemical overlay zone, which is an industrial area of the city with both light and general industrially zoned properties. The purpose and intent of the HCO zone is to allow for the use of properties within the city for the manufacture and wholesale trade of hazardous drugs, chemicals and allied products, and petroleum bulk stations as a principal permitted use. Per Article 26 of the Zoning Code for the industrial zone, uses involving hazardous chemicals or waste in the general industrial N2 zone are subject to a conditional use permit. Further, Article 30 for the HCO zone specifies that a transfer station may be allowed on select M2 zone properties designated as HCO, subject to the approval of a conditional use permit by the Planning Commission. The applicant is requesting to operate a 10-day exempt transfer facility. I apologize. For household, universal, and e-waste. The operations will utilize a cargo container for material storage, an outdoor covered area for trash and latex paint, and on-site office for administrative support. And these are some of the common household materials. So it'd be household waste, universal, and e-waste. These are some of the examples provided here. And the applicant has provided a risk analysis and protocol for hazards, including spills, traffic, and employee safety, as included in the attachment to the staff report. The provided site plan shows the existing structures on site as well as proposed parking layout, landscaping, and storage areas. As part of this application, the applicant will be requesting approval of the previously unpermitted outdoor covered storage area and cargo container on site in the rear portion of the lot, as shown here. And the required parking for the site is 8 spaces based on Article 39, required parking per use type provided. And this includes office, warehouse, and outdoor storage areas. and the applicant has provided 9 spaces on site for parking of fleet and employee vehicles. The map to the left represents the buffer between the subject site and the nearest sensitive receptors, which are residential uses. The nearest residential site is 2,181 feet away. And the second map below shows similar uses in the area as indicated by the red dots, which include a grease and cooking oil recycling facility, a waste and trash collection facility, a biohazard and medical waste collection facility, and a hazardous waste handling facility. The project is categorically exempt from environmental review under CEQA Guidelines Section 15301 for existing facilities, as it involves utilizing a developed lot to carry out operations. All materials will be stored on site in sealed containers for a short period of time, and no additional handling, pouring, or repackaging will take place on site. A notice of exemption has been prepared and will be filed for this project. The applicant has filed a request to operate a US DOT exempt 10-day hazardous waste transfer facility. The proposed CUP is consistent with the permitted uses in the general industrial zone and the hazardous chemical overlay, and will not result in an overconcentration of such uses in this area. Staff recommends approval of the request, as all required findings for HCO zone and conditional use permits have been met. This concludes staff's presentation. Staff and the applicant are available to address any questions. The applicant would also like to provide a brief presentation if permitted to do so.
Okay, thank you. I neglected to ask planning commissioners if there were any disclosures.
Yeah, so I will now.
Thank you. Apologies. It's I have it written down. It just slips my mind.
Yeah, so, once again, the disclosure that I am friends with the owner of the property.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Spear. Go ahead.
Just a quick question for my knowledge and understanding. I know you made mention that the storage facility would have permits, permit controls. I just am not familiar with what kind of conditions go into obtaining a permit that assure the city that, hey, there's going to be some safe practices. Is that all embedded within the permit, or how does that work?
So there is a requirement to comply with all state and local regulations as well as county regulations. They are regulated by the U.S. Department of Transportation, and so that is the guidelines that they have to follow.
Following up on that, would the fire marshal want to elaborate from her perspective, since she is the expert on the issues that we might be concerned about regarding this? And I don't want to think she spent all this time sitting here for nothing.
You just saw me and wanted to talk to me. I'm Lavonna Kretke. I'm the Deputy Fire Marshal at the Fire Department. I did review this project and received the commodities list or potential commodities list of what might be stored. They are meeting all fire code requirements, and they're underneath what we call MAQs, maximum allowable quantities, to store to meet those requirements. So we have no reservations or concerns.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Could I follow up with a question for you?
Yes, sir.
Is it ever typical for a local jurisdiction to add conditions above and beyond those that you mentioned? Or is that not typical?
We can. We do it based on what we have adopted locally. So there can be requirements based on, most often it's based on evacuation requirements for housing tracts or facilities like that, or developments like that, or something that comes based on a fire severity zone.
Based on, at least what you're familiar with in terms of here in Escondido or other jurisdictions that you might be privy to, have there been conditions like that added typically for a use like this, or not really?
Not that I've personally put forth. outside of what we have adopted locally.
Okay, thank you.
How frequently are the facility inspected by the fire marshal?
The state fire code requires that we inspect them annually, depending on their operational permits.
Okay.
It can vary depending on, you know, what the operation is. This particular facility would be an annual inspection.
Annual.
For us.
One more question for staff. You said something was going to be stored outside, but I didn't catch it. What was it that was going to be stored outside?
So that would be the latex paint is the storage.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have other questions of staff? Commissioner Spear?
I can't recall if it was spoken, but did we have any opposition, any public comments from this at all?
We didn't receive anything for this.
And we had our typical outreach, I assume? Yeah.
We notified the public.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Jester.
Is this open to the public? Is this private? How is this? I mean, household waste, I don't know. What's your business model? Okay. Sorry.
Okay, if we don't have any other questions, we'll go ahead and move to the applicant's presentation.
Hello. Hi, my name is Daniel, and I am with Hazaway today. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for meeting with us. So yeah, we're Hazaway today. We're a 10-day storage facility for household hazardous waste. We also work with different businesses to help them with their hazardous waste. But our bread and butter is the household hazardous waste. So a lot of the times people, when they move out of their house and they're moving, or if a relative passes away, unfortunately, a lot of them are left with hazardous waste where they either have two options. They wait for the facility that's provided by the county to drop it off, and that's usually a little bit of a wait, and they have a limit of about 125 pounds of hazardous waste at one time. And if you go over that, technically, according to the CHP, you are in violation, and it's against the law to do that. Most of the time, in our experience, we have an average of about 245 pounds from households. So doing that, you're either going to have to break that up into two different drop-offs, or risk doing something illegal and getting rejected from the drop-off facilities, taking it back to your house and having to split it up at that point. We work with a lot of different companies that recycle a lot of the waste that we pick up. So a lot of our water-based paint actually gets upcycled, where they mix it all into a huge vat, and then they actually paint over graffiti, paint new schools, paint driveways, paint curbs and stuff like that. And we also provide the businesses with a solution for their waste. In San Diego County, as far as the research that I've done, we actually only have one treatment facility that actually treats waste here. Most of the people here in San Diego County actually move waste, so they don't actually treat it here. It ends up going to where the treatment facilities are. They're concentrated in LA County, and that's where they end up going. But we would be another transporter to help out the businesses, to give them another lifeline to get rid of their waste effectively and also safely as well. And here is one of our founders. His name is Drew Boyles. He's actually the mayor of Escondido. He studied at USC, got his MBA in finance, started with a company called 1-800-GOT-JUNK, and he worked his way from being in the trucks, working with all the different the customers face to face, to owning multiple 1-800-GOT-JUNKs, and then also starting Hazaway today. He saw that there was an ineffective solution to getting rid of your hazardous waste, so he went on, thought of an idea of how to get rid of it, and then he created us, and that's where we come along.
Did you throw that in just because you know I have USC season tickets?
No, but I'll definitely mention that again. So, like I said, he's actually graduated from USC. So.
I'm reading it right now, yes.
So we have mainly worked in LA County. That's where we started, and that's where the areas that we service. We service LA County, Orange County. We've gone as far up north as Santa Barbara, and we've actually gone as far down south as San Isidro. So we've have a wide area of service, and we've helped over 6,000 customers. Most of them, I would say 99% of them, have left us 5-star reviews. If you go onto our Google page, we actually have, I believe now it's 913 5-star reviews. None of them were paid, so they were actually charged for the service. So we provide the service and make sure that they are satisfied. One of the things in our industry, in the commercial side, is that they focus on the waste. Nobody focuses on the clients. And our clients are the residential clients, so we make sure that they're happy. A lot of them come with a lot of grievances because a family member passes away and they have no idea how to get rid of 500 pounds of hazardous waste. That's where we come in. We provide them with a solution for the waste, and we also provide them with comfort through our customer service, making sure that they feel like they're taken care of in a time that they probably feel like they are absolutely not taken care of. In Southern California, we've managed over 800 tons of hazardous waste, preventing it from going into the landfills, into the oceans, into places that it's not properly taken care of. And then a lot of our waste, approximately 71% of our HHW, which is household hazardous waste, actually gets upcycled. A lot of the items that we pick up are your Windexes, your Comets to clean items, your pesticides, your automotive fluids, things like that. Something that you would find common inside of your garage, under your sink, in your back house, in the where you keep all your garden tools. A lot of that stuff is water-based, and a lot of that stuff can be upcycled, recycled. So we make sure that we work with companies that actually recycle it and don't just incinerate it, throw it away, bury it in the landfill. So what benefit are we going to bring to Escondido and San Diego County? So one of the benefits is that there is nobody, as far as I know, servicing household clients, helping them with their hazardous waste. That's where we come in. We provide that solution to the people having to wait 1 to 2 to 3 weeks for an appointment to be able to drop off hazardous waste. And mind you, only 125 pounds at a time. So somebody that has 600, 700, 800 pounds, they're gonna have to wait a couple of weeks, a couple of months, possibly even a year to be able to get rid of their stuff. We work 24, we don't work 24/7. We work 7 days a week, and our earliest appointment is at 8 o'clock in the morning. Last appointment is 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So people have more than an ample time to give us a call, schedule us out there. We're named Hasway today, so within 24 hours, we will be at your doorstep from you calling us to be able to get rid of your stuff. Since September of 2022, that's when we started testing the San Diego market. In San Diego, we've actually removed in Escondido, we've removed 4,991 pounds so far. And in all of San Diego County, we removed approximately 40,000 pounds of hazardous waste. That's 40,000 pounds that did not go into your sewers, 40,000 pounds that did not go into your ocean, 40,000 pounds that did not get buried in the landfill. And this is an example of some of the different ways that we have packaging on our LA Gardena site. Box on the left, packaged properly, has the 2 straps, placards on it with the labels on it, making sure that if any inspector would come and see that, they would clap. They would be proud of them being able to see that, because it's perfectly managed and it's not something that's half spilling, that's all over the floor everywhere, as in some cases, some of our inspectors have actually told us that they would see that. There is no pouring on site. I want to make that clear to everybody. We are just a transfer station. Think of us as another logistics company. So think of us as another FedEx, another Amazon, another UPS. What we do, we're just putting things inside of things. We are essentially just holding all the waste for it to go to its final destination. The waste will be packaged on site at the client site. From there, it's never going to be touched until it reaches the destination. And it's either recycled, upcycled, or disposed of properly. And then we've, to date, knock on wood, we've had 0 incidents in our LA Gardena facility, and from when we've been doing all of our jobs, we haven't had anything happen to us, luckily. And we hope to keep that over here with our safety procedures that we will be implementing in the Escondido facility. And all of the waste will be taken off-site to comply with that 10-day compliance. On average, we ship every week, so you will never see that waste on site for more than approximately 7 days. And yeah, that's it for us. This is a picture of our team. We're happy to have the opportunity to open in Escondido, and we'd be more than happy to be a part of the community with everyone.
All right, thank you. We have questions for the applicant? Commissioner Jester.
Thank you for that great presentation. Appreciate that. My question is, do you guys deal at all with any of the ACQs and MCA, like treated lumber or anything like that? Do you guys accept that in your facility, or is that not part of your?
No, that would be not part of our scope.
Okay, so you sell it at Home Depot, but you can't get rid of it anywhere.
Right, yeah, it's actually a big issue for us in LA County as well. We get a lot of those calls all the time.
Yeah.
It's become a lot more regulated over time, and as far as, I believe, two years ago, the landfill that actually accepted that now started requiring a lot more paperwork for it. A lot of more people are just not disposing of that over there. It's just gotten a lot more difficult, so we stayed away from it.
2 other questions I have. One other question I have, sorry. Will anybody be living on the site?
Living on site, no.
Yes, okay.
No.
One more question, I'm sorry, and this is it, I promise. So I understand there's some buildings there that weren't permitted, is that the idea?
Correct.
Okay.
As far as we know, they weren't. We're still researching that, and if we do not find the permits for it, we will make sure that they get permitted before.
Yeah, I saw it was part of the conditions, so thank you.
Commissioner Stevie.
Aside from taxes the city gets on the property, is there any other way the city realizes revenue from your operation? And if so, about how much do you forecast on an annual basis?
I wouldn't have, do you have an answer to that? Not that I'm aware of.
Commissioner Spear.
Just a quick question. I'm just curious, in terms of economic benefit to Escondido, I think you mentioned that there is no other facility that operates in this space in terms of what services you offer in San Diego County, is that correct?
As a at-your-door service, yes.
Okay. In other places that you've operated, as you've opened up like you're doing here, or want to do here, are you getting, I assume, business from outside of the immediate area? People from the county end up coming? Do you see a reach like that? And I guess the question is, would this anticipate bring people to Escondido from outside of Escondido?
That would be
based on your other stores.
Yeah, so this will be actually our first branch out of the Gardena, the first one that we have. So
oh, okay.
Yeah, this would be the first one. As to say if it would attract people, I'm not exactly sure about that.
Okay. With Gardena, for example, how far of a reach are you getting in the LA County area?
So that we go, like I've mentioned, we've gone as far north as Santa Barbara. We go inland to Riverside, San Bernardino, those areas, and then from that facility, we've actually come down here, all the way down to San Isidro, to help San Diego to test the market. We found that there was a need for it, so we decided to open up the branch down here.
Okay. Last question is, why Escondido in particular? What brought you here?
I'll answer that with another question. Why not? We chose Escondido because we found the perfect spot. 610 Metcalf works essentially how we initially operated in Gardena. We had a warehouse space. We had the warehouse space where we stored all of the waste. We started from small roots. We started from literally one lane, a place inside of a warehouse, to having half of a warehouse to having our own warehouse. And we chose Escondido because it was centrally located. We did the math. Honestly, San Diego has some of the best traffic I've ever seen. I live in LA, commute in LA. To go 30 miles, it takes us an hour and a half. To go 30 miles down here, it takes 30 minutes. And when I started coming down here to test the market, I was honestly surprised, and nobody believed me that it actually took 30 minutes to go 30 miles. So we could get down to the border, I calculated, within about 40 minutes. We can go as far up north as Paula in 25 minutes, I think it was. So yeah, it was close to the freeways, which is another big factor to be able to access everywhere.
So if I could summarize that, you're saying that the geographic location was optimal, the transportation as far as the ease of access, and then the infrastructure that we had here was conducive to what you wanted to do.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
I've got a couple of questions. So your business model is strictly you go to the customer, pick up the material, bring it back, and then put it into the shipping container before it gets shipped off-site. Oh, and what I'm kind of getting at is, do customers actually come to this location to drop off their hazardous waste?
Yeah, just wanted to clarify, we don't pack anything on site, at 610 Metcalf. Everything is packaged on the customer's site. So if I were to go to your house, I would package all the Windexes, all the Roundups that you have, package it there on site, and it's never opened upon being loaded up into our van.
I think what he was saying is, do clients come to there to drop stuff off?
Right.
So then you would package there.
No, so we do not advertise that we are a drop-off facility. We actually are not permitted for that.
Got it.
So we do not allow.
Okay, that was the clarification that I was looking for. Yeah, but it just wasn't quite clear in the staff report whether or not customers actually came to your site, but based on the description, everything's packaged. And they get packaged in those boxes, essentially?
Yeah, so it's, if we want to go back to the...
So they're not the individual containers that are on the right
so,
side?
Yeah, depending on the size of the job, mostly the box on the left, the left, it is usually reserved for industrial clients that have, let's say, like 30 1-gallon containers. It's more effective for us to be able to package it in that versus having the drums on the right that would package, let's say, 10 1-gallon containers for a different customer. So different customers require different size containers and so forth. So yeah, they're packaged in UN-regulated containers, so nothing is packaged in like a milk crate and shipped out there with the hazardous labels on it. Everything is DOT compliant and yeah.
Okay. Actually, that really clarified a lot for me. And then also the fire department's confirmed that they're fine with the hazardous waste that's being essentially stored there under 10 days and then transported off-site via the DOT regulations. So it's the Department of Transportation that actually regulates you, not Cal Recycle or any one of the other state organizations?
They actually do. We get regulated by, I believe, 7 different agencies, so we have to follow strict laws regarding all of them. So some of them are the Cal Recycle, DTSC, DOT, EPA, a couple of other ones.
So it's a whole series, and you got to prepare reports almost probably on a daily or at least weekly basis, ship that up to the state, and stay on top of all of those regulatory requirements showing how much you've brought in, where it went, those sort of things.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions. Any other questions of the applicant?
I have one other question, maybe a little odd, but just for my own information. So let's say I have 35 gallons of paint in my house. What would you charge me to come to my house, pick it up?
So we get that a lot.
You charge by the gallon, or
We'd help you out. It's by the pound, if anybody was curious.
Okay.
$2.50 per pound. And if we have a minimum. If you have under the 40 pounds, then it's $99. And if it's over the 40 pounds, then it just switches over to the $2.50 per pound.
But there's no like sales tax or any other revenue that's realized for the city on that?
It's all included. So we calculated the taxes, we calculated the transportation, labor, everything into that $2.50 per pound.
So there is a tax? No. Yes. No.
No, it's service provided. Yeah, it's just a service to you.
It's not a sales tax,
Okay.
sales tax or anything like that.
All right. Any other questions?
If I could add also, if you wanted a book, you can call our hotline or book online. Perfect.
Perfect. Any other questions? Do we have anybody here to speak on this?
No public comment to be received.
All right. At this point, any discussion? Entertain a motion?
It serves a public need. If you're going to come to Escondido, a better place to locate it than next to our other facility that accepts all the other waste that we produce. So yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the project.
We have a motion by Vice Chair, second by Commissioner Jester. If we could go ahead, any discussion? Okay, if we could go ahead and...
Voting has been open for you. If you could refresh, please. And the vote is 7-0 to approve the project.
All right, congratulations.
Thank you.
At this point, we'll go ahead and move on to, let's see, we've got current business. So current business this evening would be Commissioner Jester asked to have a discussion on the Planning Commission bylaws. So I'll go ahead and turn that over to Commissioner Jester, and then we can just start our discussion from there.
Oh, thank you. Stan, appreciate it. So just as an outsider coming in and trying to really kind of get a sense about the commission, one of the very first things that I read was the bylaws, and I'll try to brief. I only have a few suggestions and recommendations. Some parts of it were a little confusing to me. And so I wanted to, and then some parts I just didn't understand at all, especially when it comes to the minutes clerk, planning commission clerk, secretary of the planning commission clerk, and all the other clerks that are involved in it. The page 13 of the bylaws, under the meeting minutes, it references the number one. It says the minutes clerk is instructed to prepare action minutes for each planning commission meeting. What are action minutes? Is that an agenda?
That would actually be the minutes that are provided and that we review, make a motion to approve or modify right at the very beginning of the meeting. So it does go through and it says, all right, here was the item, here was the discussion, and the action that actually occurred, whether it was to approve.
Okay, that's what I thought it said. The very next sentence, it says the planning commission clerk. Okay, the switch in terms there. Now, if these are synonymous, shouldn't there be some type of, like at the beginning, if we say this, it means this, verbiage or something? It says the planning commission clerk shall add a brief description or topic for oral communication speakers and all that stuff. So Are these a switch in roles, or are these the same person, or?
It's actually a good question that I don't have an answer for. I'll look at both ends and
From my understanding, it is just a nomenclature. It is the same role. I serve both roles.
So they are synonymous?
It is the same role, correct.
Okay. All right. That was the most confusing one to me. Thank you for that clarification.
I believe it may be missing a word as the Planning Commission minutes clerk, because there are minutes clerks for multiple commissions throughout the city,
Right.
including the city council.
Right.
Acts as the city clerk, and this is the same. It seems to borrow similar language from my understanding, but it is the same role.
Okay. The other thing that the bylaws didn't state was on page 15, section C3, regarding the officers. It doesn't give a term for the officers. Should that be something you would add in there? That, you know, it talks about, you know, voting on a chair and vice chair, but it doesn't say how long they'll serve. I'm assuming it's for a year.
yeah, I
It doesn't
thought
say it in the bylaws.
it doesn't actually say it, because I know in practice that's what it's been, and it's usually, I think it goes, that the chair serves, and the chair and vice chair serve until March 30th. I thought it was in there, but it very well may not be. And it's been, yeah, March 31st. And it's been a while since I've looked at it as closely as you have. Anybody have an answer? I know it's been that way in practice, and there have been occasions where we were all the way into May before somebody realized, oh gosh, we were supposed to do this.
It doesn't state the, it states that the selection of the chair and vice chair will be the first regular meeting held after March 31st. So that's when the.
By implication?
Yeah, I mean, you're correct. It could be more clear that would be the term, but that's when the selection is made, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Page 8, item number 7, section B, refers to, and I think that this goes along with the work plan of the Planning Commission. It calls it a Planning Commission work plan. Should that not be changed to Planning Division work plan?
Can I ask you a quick question? How many more of these things do you have?
I got two or three more.
Isn't this all stuff you should just be emailing them and asking them?
Well,
talking here at 9:40 at night?
you know what? If you guys want to table this to another time.
Well, there's no reason to have a discussion. You're just asking her questions.
Well,
For clarification.
No, I think it's actually kind of appropriate, because if there are necessary changes, I think this group needs to agree upon what those changes may need to be. Certainly if there's typographical type errors.
Well, that's what it seems so far.
Yeah, well, this is what we're kind of finding out right now, and it sounds like if there are typographical errors or clarifications that are needed, then we should be voting as a group to say, yes, let's make these changes. I think that's the whole purpose of having this discussion in the public forum.
there was some discussion about what the Planning Commission could do with regard to staff and their actual workload. And that's why I think it was Veronica that specifically said something about changing this to the Planning Division work plan.
Yeah, I recall that being something that she had said. I think that, again, and that's some of the nomenclature that maybe would be appropriate to clarify.
And I believe we did make, at least in some aspects, we did make changes to that for clarification purposes. This may be an additional area where that wasn't carried through.
That's what I'm kind of suspecting, because we did that because there was it said Planning Commission work plan, and there's a whole table and list of all of these various things.
Exactly.
Well, it was really Planning Division.
So now we know what's referring. The only other question that I have with regard to the bylaws is page 10, commission action and agenda matters. It refers to a presiding officer. And as the first time I was reading through that, I really wasn't sure who the presiding officer was. Maybe consider changing it to presiding chair or vice chair to be more clear.
Do we know the intent of presiding officer? Because I don't know the answer.
I believe it's intended to be the chair. Whoever's chairing them,
Okay.
the meeting would be presiding.
Okay.
That's it.
Any questions or comments regarding what Commissioner Jester brought up? The only thing I've kind of got is, maybe we need to make these changes so that it is clear. Because I get when you read it and you're going, okay, who's this person, who's that person? And maybe it's changed over time, or maybe it's old language, who knows? But I would not, I'd be in agreement to go ahead and make these modifications just to get the clarification. I don't see any downside to doing that.
I'm okay with that, but I think presiding officer is self-explanatory.
Is the what, I'm sorry? Oh, got it.
Yeah, I think that was probably for me the most difficult thing, that there wasn't a consistency in usage of terms. And I'm trying to follow the flow of it. And when a new term was introduced, I was like, okay, well, this is something new.
I think.
I'm okay with leaving it the way it is.
I do like to change the two changes. One to the minutes clerk as opposed to planning commission clerk. I think that was just an omission. The other one would be
Planning division, work plan.
planning division, yes, thank you. The third one that you brought up, presiding officer, I think that should stay the same. Only reason being because we had this evening where if the chair's not here, the vice chair's not here, then we vote on a new chair at that given moment. So presiding officer, I think, would be appropriate to leave as it is. So what do we do from here?
That's a good question, because this item came on the agenda not really as an action item. So
Right.
technically, the commission, as a very technical matter, isn't really supposed to take any action on this item. I could just suggest, I know our city planner is not here, so I want to be careful about, thrusting work her way. But I might just make the suggestion that if the commission is in agreement that this is the direction that you want to take, and just make these two changes, you could certainly just state that for the record. You'd like those two changes to be made, and staff could bring that back as an action item to vote at a subsequent meeting.
Okay.
Another alternative is if people want to take a harder look at the bylaws and have a more serious discussion about them, we can agendize it that way.
Yeah, I did send Veronica my questions earlier in the week, just because I didn't know if this was the format. That was the first thing I asked you. Is this the format for us to even talk about this stuff?
Yeah, we've done that.
Been out on vacation, so.
Yeah,
Sorry.
she got a vacation.
So it was about time.
Wow.
She deserved it.
So is everyone generally in agreement to make those two changes, and then, we can present that to Veronica, and then we'll take it from there, whatever is appropriate. Okay.
That should be fine.
Everybody all right? All right. Anything else, Commissioner Jester?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to future agenda items. Looking in the wrong direction, sorry.
Oh, thank you, Chair Weiler. Hello, everyone. My name's Oscar Romero. As you can tell, Veronica Morones, our city planner, is not here. But I will take care of this portion for everyone. Just so you know, we have a private development project that's coming within the next, I'd say, 2 to 4 months, and that would be the Conway Nash subdivision unit design review. Aside from that, we have some policy work also coming your way. We have a general plan amendment for the East Valley specific plan, a follow-up, an annual progress report, and a pre-approved accessory dwelling unit program, which will all be coming your way soon. And then finally, we have a couple informational presentations, One is going to be based on CEQA, kind of walking you through the process, walking you through the reviews and kind of what planning staff has been doing. The other will be historic preservation. And then the last one would be a North County Mall permit history. And that's our update.
Okay, thank you. I suspect we don't have any other oral communications. Planning Commissioners report, anybody? City Planners report, I think that's about it. Yeah, and you know what, the only thing I have to say before we close is I want to thank Vice Chair Barber for taking over while I had to recuse. I thought you did well. It was a very lively discussion, and I appreciate that. Anybody else have anything to say? All right, with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting.